There are some movies that just universally hit the spot.
Oh, totally.
Like you sit down, the underdog steps up to the plate, or, well, the cricket pitch in this case, and by the end of it, you are just on your feet cheering.
Yeah, you really are. And if you were a fellow movie fan listening to this, you probably remember the 2001 film Lagaan exactly like that.
Right. It stands in our collective memory as like the ultimate uplifting anti-colonial sports classic.
It's iconic. We get this incredibly triumphant story of rural Indian villagers beating the British Empire at their own game just to cancel an unjust tax.
It feels so good. It's so pure to watch. But today on our deep dive, we're taking a stack of fascinating new historical critiques and deep film analyses to figure out what is really going on beneath the surface of this beloved classic.
Yes, because our mission today is to uncover the incredibly messy, uncomfortable history that Lagaan had to, well, completely erase just to make us feel so good.
I love that we are tearing down the illusion today.
Oh, we're definitely tearing it down. The contrast between how that movie makes you feel and what it's actually doing structurally is a really profound critical breakthrough.
Okay, so what is the analysis saying it's actually doing?
Well, when we look past that feel-good surface, the argument is that Lagaan is not a factual historical record of anti-colonial resistance.
Right.
Like, at all. Instead, it functions as this highly orchestrated ideological project rooted in a concept called historical displacement.
Historical displacement, okay.
It actively smooths over the violent, chaotic realities of the 19th century to construct this triumphant, unified memory. So it basically serves as a comforting nationalist myth designed specifically for a modern audience.
Man, it feels like looking at a beautifully painted family portrait, like admiring how happy everyone looks and then suddenly realizing half the people were photoshopped in to hide a massive, ugly family feud.
Exactly. That is a perfect way to put it.
So if this movie is essentially a cinematic Photoshop job, I guess the first logical question is what exactly it's hiding and maybe more importantly, when it's hiding it from. Because the movie is explicitly set in 1893.
Right. But these critiques suggest the real target audience is from a completely different era. The timeline is basically the master key to unlocking the film's true purpose.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the narrative takes place during severe agrarian crisis in 1893. But the year of its release, 2001, carries far more weight.
Interesting. Why 2001 specifically?
Well, we have to look at the massive modern anxieties India was grappling with right at the dawn of the 21st century.
Right. There was a lot going on.
A ton. The country was facing the intense pressures of rapid globalization, rising religious nationalism, and enduring really violent fractures along caste lines.
Yeah, the social fabric was, like, deeply fragmenting.
Exactly. So placing the story in the distant past is a totally deliberate strategy to handle those modern issues.
I guess instead of making a gritty movie about the complex problems of 2001, which would probably just stress the audience out more, the filmmaker creates a mirror.
Yes, a mirror. They reflect those contemporary anxieties into a mythologized colonial era. It gives the modern audience a way to feel better about the divisions happening right outside the movie theater.
Wow. So the historical setting acts as this, like, cinematic safe space.
Precisely. By displacing these anxieties into the 1890s, modern social fractures can be symbolically healed on screen. The audience gets to experience this collective, unifying victory against a very clear, unambiguous foreign oppressor.
Wait, so you're saying the cricket match isn't actually about beating the British in 1893.
Whoop.
It's a way to make a 2001 audience feel unified. So the cricket pitch is basically a historical battleground where the Indian nation is retroactively imagined as perfectly united.
You nailed it. But, to sell an audience on that level of comfort and unity, the narrative requires perfect, spotless heroes.
Oh, for sure. You need a team that represents everyone coming together flawlessly without any of the real-world friction.
Exactly. And let's look at who actually makes up this perfect village team and the massive economic realities the analysis says had to be erased to make them look so unified.
Okay, let's get into the characters.
The character allegories are meticulously constructed. So Guvan, the main hero, he's positioned as the morally pure agrarian heart of the resistance.
Right.
And Gauri, his primary love interest, embodies the loyal indigenous soil.
That makes a lot of sense. And the cinematography really leans into that, right?
Heavily.
Yeah.
It actively builds Bhuvan's rise into a mythic leader. Like early in the movie, the camera captures him mostly at eye level.
Which grounds him as a peer to his community, right? Like a man of the earth.
Exactly. But as he slowly becomes the face of the nation's resistance, The visual framing shifts entirely to these heroic low-angle shots.
It literally forces the audience to look up to him as the undisputed leader. That's so clever.
It is. But constructing that flawless image of a leader and a perfectly unified village behind him, that requires erasing a massive amount of economic history.
Oh, right. Because the film basically blames the devastating 1893 famine on a failed monsoon and, like, one cartoonishly evil British officer, Captain Russell.
Who arbitrarily demands double the normal tax.
Right. Yeah, it reduces a systemic catastrophe to bad weather and one bad apple.
Which is wild, because the true historical reality of the 1890s famines was rooted in engineered structural violence.
Wait, engineered. What do you mean by that?
Well, the British Empire forcibly transitioned India's economy from subsistence farming to the production of cash crops.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so instead of growing food to survive, peasants were forced to cultivate indigo, cotton, and opium.
Just for the global export market.
Exactly. And the mechanics of that are just devastating. If you are a farmer growing wheat or rice and the economy crashes, you can at least eat your crop.
Right. But if your fields are entirely dedicated to indigo for British textile mills and a drought hits, you have zero food reserves. I mean, you can't eat indigo.
You really can't. So the famine wasn't just a natural disaster where the rain failed. It was an economic vulnerability, intentionally designed by imperial trade policies.
And the movie completely sidesteps that reality by just looking at the sky and blaming the clouds. That's crazy.
It gets crazier because the structural erasure goes much deeper than just the crops. The narrative completely ignores the zamindari and rayatwari systems.
Okay, remind me, what were those again?
They were complex land revenue frameworks. The British heavily relied on Indian intermediaries for them. Local landlords, known as zamdars, along with a whole network of moneylenders, were the actual agents of extraction.
So the British weren't just going door to door themselves.
Rarely. They rarely interacted directly with the peasantry to collect taxes the way Captain Russell dramatically does in the film.
So the historical setup involved massive wealth inequality within the Indian population itself.
Absolutely. Some of these local Indian elites were getting incredibly wealthy by ruthlessly impoverishing their own neighbors to meet British quotas.
Wow. While skimming a massive share for themselves, I bet.
Oh, definitely. And this would obviously create deep, violent class antagonism between the rural poor and the Indian upper classes.
But that internal exploitation is entirely scrubbed from the film's narrative.
Completely. I mean, the local Indian ruler, the Raja, is depicted as this sympathetic, helpless figure who quietly roots for the villagers from the sidelines.
Right. When historically, many of those rulers and landlords were actively complicit in the economic extraction.
Yes. Pitting a unified village solely against a British uniform magically absolves the Indian upper classes of their role in exploiting the rural poor.
Here is where it gets really interesting for you listening. Think about the sheer emotional convenience of that. So the movie blames the drought and one mean British guy letting the local elite completely off the hook.
Yep.
That's like blaming a natural rainstorm for a catastrophic flood when the city intentionally destroyed the dam for profit.
That is a perfect analogy. By making it just villagers versus British uniform, they build this fantasy of a perfectly unified team.
Right, but that brings us to how this cinematic fantasy handles the deepest, arguably most complex social divide in India, the caste system.
Yeah, this is huge. The treatment of caste centers heavily on the character of Kachra, the Dalit sweeper.
Okay, let's talk about Kachra.
The analysis points to his inclusion in the cricket team as carrying the heaviest structural burden in the entire film. In the narrative, Poovan forces the hesitant upper caste villagers to accept Kachra.
He delivers that super passionate speech about equality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And physically embraces Kachra to break the ancient taboo of untouchability.
He does, and it plays as a monumental, progressive moment of liberation for the oppressed classes.
And honestly, on a first watch, that scene feels incredible. You really want to cheer.
Of course you do. But the critiques we are unpacking today reveal that this moment is highly conditional. The academic term used here is a utilitarian compromise.
A utilitarian compromise, which means what exactly?
It means Kachra is not integrated into the village collective because his inherent human dignity is suddenly recognized by the upper castes.
Wait, really?
No, he is accepted specifically because his disabled arm allows him to bowl an unplayable spin on the cricket pitch.
Oh my God, his physical value to the team completely overshadows his social marginalization.
Exactly. The village only decides to ignore centuries of violent caste prejudice because they require his specific physical skills to win a game and save themselves from the tax.
That is wild when you think about it. This links caste oppression uncomfortably close to a physical disability.
Right. Which risks conflating a socially constructed degradation with a biological defect.
The implications of that are just staggering. He's not accepted as an equal human being. He's accepted because he's a secret weapon to win a game.
Yep.
It totally changes the tone of that triumphant integration scene. We're basically cheering for a community that is saying, we will treat you like a human being, but only for the duration of this match.
But only because you can do something we cannot.
It makes you wonder how we all just cheered for that without realizing the implications, just tokenizing him for his physical utility.
And furthermore, Kachra is given almost no voice or agency throughout the film's runtime. He does not actively fight for his own rights or articulate his own struggle.
Right. His integration is basically granted to him as an act of moral charity by an upper caste leader.
Exactly. And this dynamic closely mirrors the historical limitations of elite nationalist movements during the independence struggle. Often, the advancement of lower castes was treated as a top-down charity project rather than a genuine effort to dismantle entrenched social hierarchies.
So Katra's physical utility on the pitch is masking thousands of years of real, brutal caste violence.
Yes, the inclusion of his character acts as another layer of the comforting myth, suggesting that a shared struggle against the British magically erased all internal caste violence.
Unbelievable. And he's not the only character whose structural reality is manipulated for the plot, right? Let's look at Lakha, the traitor.
Right. If Katra's inclusion is a convenient rewrite of social hierarchy, the film does something equally drastic with the economic realities of the villagers through Lakha.
So the narrative frames Lakha, the woodcutter, as this jealous spy. Like, his betrayal of the village is motivated by his unrequited love for Gowrie.
That's the surface read, yeah. But the critical analysis argues that Lakha structurally represents something much darker and more systemic.
Which is?
The severe economic desperation of the colonized. The British Empire did not control the subcontinent entirely through military might.
Right.
They maintained their grip by systematically cultivating native informants and exploiting economically vulnerable locals.
Oh, so that material anxiety is key. Because Lakha's livelihood relies on grueling labor in the forest, so he is deeply economically insecure.
Exactly. But the movie reduces his betrayal to a soap opera love triangle, which makes it so much easier for the audience to digest.
I mean, it is far simpler to be angry at a petty, jealous ex than to reckon with a starving victim of the very system we are supposed to be cheering for.
Right. Captain Russell does not force Lakha's submission through physical violence. He purchases his loyalty by exploiting his poverty.
And the resolution of Lakha's storyline really pushes that under the rug, too. When his betrayal is discovered, Bhuvan stops the village mob from killing him.
He does.
Instead, he uses this, Gandhian philosophy of community labor, demanding Lakha redeem himself through service on the cricket pitch.
Right. And while this narrative choice emphasizes forgiveness, it completely ignores the severe poverty that made Lakha susceptible to bribery in the first place.
Wow.
Historical anti-colonial movements were frequently undermined by the extreme poverty of marginalized figures, and nationalist leaders often fail to protect or provide for them economically.
So the film replaces the crushing reality of colonial poverty with a narrative about personal jealousy and personal redemption.
Yep.
But that crushing poverty doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a direct result of how the empire operates. Which brings us perfectly to the people pulling the strings in this narrative, the British.
Yes. Specifically, the two very different faces of the British Empire, represented by Captain Russell and his sister Elizabeth.
Oh man, these two. They really are complete opposites in the film.
Together, they illustrate the comprehensive mechanics of colonial rule. So Captain Russell is the embodiment of tyrannical, raw economic extraction.
Oh yeah, he is arrogant, sadistic, and driven by explicit racial supremacy.
And if you watch the visual language of the film closely, his cruelty is actually baked into the color grading.
Oh really? How so?
He is consistently associated with rigid reds, deep imperial blues, and artificial greens that make him look alien to the dusty natural landscape. He rules through pure intimidation.
He really provides the perfect cinematic villain. You just love to hate him.
You do. But Elizabeth presents a much trickier historical dynamic.
Yeah, she defies her cruel brother, sneaks out to the village, and teaches the Indians the complex rules of cricket.
The narrative positions her as a vital, empathetic ally. But viewing her through this critical lens reveals she actually represents the insidious nature of imperial paternalism.
Meaning she's kind of the quintessential embodiment of the civilizing mission of the empire.
Exactly. Captain Russell rules through fear, but Elizabeth rules through sympathy.
Both approaches fundamentally rely on the assumption that the native population is incapable of achieving liberation without European guidance, though.
Bingo. She operates from a position of absolute unquestioned racial superiority, even when she's being helpful.
It always felt a bit strange to me. The white savior trope is operating at full capacity here. Like, it's visually jarring to see her standing in this bright, pristine Victorian dress, looking totally alien against the mudhucks, single-handedly teaching them how to save themselves.
Right. She's the good cop. But the assumption is that these poor villagers could never possibly figure out the game or their own salvation without the moral intervention of a benevolent European.
Like, you poor natives need me to save yourselves.
Exactly. And the film even exacts a subtle cinematic revenge through her character arc.
Oh, how?
By having Elizabeth fall in unrequited love with Bhuvan, the narrative positions the Indian man as the object of British desire.
Oh, I see. Yet he remains stubbornly loyal to his native soil and to Gowrie.
Right. It flips the power dynamic of desire, but it still relies on Elizabeth's paternalistic intervention to actually drive the plot forward.
Wow. So with all these complex pieces on the board, the cartoonish villain extracting wealth, the paternalistic savior teaching the rules, and the perfectly unified villagers with all their class and caste issues neatly swept under the rug, the film faces a massive challenge.
The huge one.
It has to resolve this incredibly complex, violent web of history and tie a neat little bow on the era.
And the analysis points to the film's spectacular formal techniques to pull off this illusion, particularly the musical numbers.
Oh, I love the music in this movie.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
But the musicality in Lagaan is not just a series of narrative pauses or entertainment breaks.
Yeah.
The song and dance sequences are the exact sites where the political organizing actually happens.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The academic critique refers to this as subaltern mobilization. The subaltern, meaning the oppressed, marginalized classes at the bottom of the social ladder, use these sequences to physically and harmonically transform from a fractured peasantry into a unified political body.
So calling it a technology of consensus building makes perfect sense. When Bhuvan rallies the villagers through song, they are literally singing their resistance into existence.
Exactly. But from a historical standpoint, real peasant rebellions were bloody, terrifying, and inherently disorganized struggles.
Right.
By translating those chaotic uprisings into a perfectly choreographed 68 time signature, the film sanitizes the past. It turns the brutal reality of rebellion into an easily consumable, aesthetically pleasing cultural spectacle.
That makes the climax of the film so much deeper, because throughout the runtime, particularly during the gun-on-gun-on sequence where they are waiting for the rain, the camera constantly lingers on the parched, deep fissures in the cracked earth.
Yes, which serves as a vital visual metaphor for the fragmented, desperate state of the Indian social fabric we discussed earlier.
So the dry, cracked earth represents the divisions of caste, class, and religion holding the country back.
Precisely. So when the monsoon rain finally arrives at the absolute climax of the cricket match, it is doing far more than just watering the crops.
It feels like a divine endorsement of the nationalist myth the movie has been building.
Yes. The torrential downpour washes away the colonial tax burden, providing the narrative resolution. But on a structural level, it symbolically washes away all internal contradictions.
Oh my gosh. The rain erases the lingering stains of caste violence, the history of class betrayal by the Zamindars, and any hint of religious division.
Everything. The storm clears, leaving behind a pristine, victorious, and historically impossible utopia.
Which brings us back to why this movie was such a massive success. It triggered massive Lagaan fever domestically and earned Oscar nods internationally because it's exactly what we want to believe happened.
It delivers a clean, flawless founding myth. It provides a fractured modern audience with the comforting, unified memory that the present desperately craves.
It basically takes the messy, uncomfortable realities of 1893 and filters them to soothe the anxieties of 2001 and honestly even of today.
It stands as a masterpiece of ideological construction.
Yeah.
It brilliantly stages the desires of a modern nation by actively choosing what to forget. The power of the film lies not in its historical accuracy, but in its ability to convince us that this unified, flawless past actually existed.
Man, what a breakdown. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's return to that beautifully altered family portrait I mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
The next time you watch your favorite uplifting historical movie, whether it is a triumphant underdog sports film or an epic war saga, think about the mechanics behind the emotion.
Ask the hard questions.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what uncomfortable, messy truths about the people outside the frame did the filmmakers have to completely erase just to make you feel this good? And more importantly, who benefits from us remembering the past as a perfectly choreographed game rather than a fractured, ongoing struggle? Keep digging, everyone.